of light of the fourth and the first ray and the fourth ray descend now into our midst. Let the sacred fire of the Godhead pierce now all sin, disease, and death throughout this planetary body. Bind all aliens, fallen ones. Blaze the lightning through sheets of white fire and blue lightning descend. Sheets of white fire and blue lightning descend. Sheets of white fire and blue lightning descend. Penetrate through, penetrate through, penetrate through, penetrate through. Blue lightning for the mind of God. Blue lightning for the mind of God. Blue lightning for God. Blue lightning for the mind of God. Let the thunderbolts descend. Let the thunderbolts descend. Bows of the lightning. 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 Let the will of God be done. Sheets of white fire. Beloved. Beloved El Moria, beloved Manila, beloved Archangel Michael, and all legions of light on the light of the fire, the white fire, the great central sun. Blaze the lightning. Blaze the power of the mighty iron presence. Blaze the power of the mighty iron presence. Blaze the lightning through. Blaze the lightning through.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a wonderful day. Would you all come in? This is our day for soul retrieval, and what an experience it is. I would like to invite Carol Ann and Larry Bethel to come to the altar and to stand about right there. Come up these steps here. You're going to be in front of what is being brought in, so we want you here so it can be behind you. It's very nice to see you both again. So this is a work of art that is the combined project and work, 3 years of work by Larry and Carol. It is the tapestry of the chart of the I Am Presence, which took 3 years of continuous work to create.
Well, my husband and I came to Summit University 3 years ago. That was the Summit University that was with the Buddha of the Ruby Ray. And as I sat at Summit University and looked at this beautiful chart, I had a lot of head talk going on saying, you could embroider that because something so beautiful shouldn't be made of paper, that it should be more, as the ladies of old did in the courts, that they made these beautiful tapestries for the altar. And I thought, I can't do that because I have no training in embroidery. And I had a lot of head talk, and as you can see, I lost the battle. And I called to beloved Linello and beloved El Moria and beloved Strappist Bay for his accuracy and beloved Paul the Venetian to help me with the different colours. And my husband made a loom specially to put that on. We bought all of the silks and the threads before we started, but what happened was that when we got right to the top of the dark blue, we ran out of cotton. And because we'd purchased it 3 years previously, we had a lot of trouble trying to find an exact dye lot to match that original one. So we made the calls, and we were in a strange town, and we went to a shopping centre I'd never been to before on my husband's suggestion. And while I was busy in a dress shop, which I thought was the only shop left open at that time of night, my husband went into a shop which sold, of all things, cigarettes. And in the back of the... He doesn't smoke. But in the back of the shop, hidden away, was an old rack of embroidery threads, and we needed exactly 14, I'd calculated, and the calls to our Moria were answered because on the bottom row was the exact dye lot and there were 14 skeins of cotton. And then when we came through customs at Manila, we of course made all the calls for it, but the ladies at Manila decided to do a drug check which included a personal body search. And the lady that was dealing with myself, her hands were quite dirty from all of the work that she'd done. And she started to unravel the embroidery which we'd lovingly carried, and I forgot a little bit that on the plane it wouldn't fit in the locker, so we had to put it on the floor. And fortunately, the lady in the third seat was so tiny that her feet didn't reach the floor. But when we came through Manila, I was very frightened that this lady with her dirty fingers would damage it, and she started to pull it apart and take it out of its protective covering. So I stood there and I made the calls to Lanello, help me, help me, help me, and to Archangel Michael, and their prayers were answered. And I held my arms out and said, it's only a picture, shall I unwrap it for you? And the lady gave me the picture and just brushed me off. And we're very pleased, Mother, to present that to you today. And the top rod is made of Australian red gum. We thought, being as it was the Buddha of the Ruby Ray, and there are 660,000 little Ruby Ray crosses, and that's how each stitch is made. To each square inch, there's 14 stitches square all the way through. So we thought, being as the focus was the Buddha of the Ruby Ray, the only appropriate wood to make that from was Australian red gum, river red gum, which is supposed to last a long time. And my husband made that and carved that all for the top. Thank you.
Larry, you took over the kitchen, I hear.
That's right, Mother. And I was highly honoured to do that. I did, in fact, always have the kitchen work. But I did have extra duties on laundering and sweeping and all the rest of it, which, again, I was very happy to do. I think I learnt a great lesson just by watching Annie. She's always been a great inspiration to me since the day I married her and before. And that was a lesson to me on persistence and constancy. And I hope I could aspire to that, something like that, someday. But it was certainly an inspiration to me. I have never seen anybody work so constantly and persistently with such love and such smiles for such a long period of time. And I thank God that I have Annie for my wife too for that.
Nothing of this until today. It was a big, big surprise package as I came into our trailer and saw it and saw how big it is. And so I said we must present it today. And what El Moria just said is that it is precisely for the day of soul retrieval because you haven't sold it.
Thank you.
I understand that you sat on the kitchen floor for all of those 3 years. I'm wondering how many hours a day you sat on the kitchen floor doing this.
It wasn't many hours per day. Thank you. It wasn't a set number of hours per day, but when I'd finished the work, because I have a full-time job too, and we have 3 study groups, but it was my relaxation in the end of the evening just to sit down and do the decrees and make the different sessions that we did. But I would say perhaps 1 or 2 hours per day.
This teaching is very profound, and it relates to the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is not easy to understand. It was the first lecture that I gave in 1992 in the Heart, when I gave a number of lectures on the mystical paths of the world's religions. So you have seen Volume 1 in the tent, and we're working on completing Volumes 2 and 3, at least by late fall. And each volume opens with about 100 pages of teachings on Kabbalah. The teachings that are in the book are vastly expanded over the lecture that I gave in the Heart. And so it's been actually something we've worked on for several years on and off, to include in the chapters on Kabbalah what keepers of the flame on the path need to understand. Kabbalah teaches about many aspects of the life of the soul, of the universe, of the creation of the universe, of the tree of life, of the spherode, and our relationship to them. It is very concentrated, very deep, and very complex. It's more complex than the sacred scriptures. You can read a chapter out of the book of Kabbalah, and there are many books on Kabbalah, but let's say on the one that I have been working on. You can read that chapter and come back to it in a day and hardly remember a word you read, because it is so deep. It is sacred scripture, and it needs to be read again and again and again. What I have injected into this work on Kabbalah is Jesus Christ and the path of the ascension and many other teachings that go hand in glove with Kabbalah. So it really is a Kabbalah for the new age and for all people and people of all religions. So some of the material that I give you now on Kabbalah is taken from that work. And when you have the 3 volumes, you will have what I believe is the most revolutionary teaching on the creation, the fall of Adam, why the fall happened, what we must do to regain our God estate. It really is a missing link that no other one of the 7 major world religions can offer us. So I'm going to go back to 1977, the first mention of soul retrieval by an ascended master in our organization. And the ascended master who spoke to us is the Goddess of Wisdom. The Goddess of Wisdom was embodied in her most recent incarnation as Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science and the author of Christian Science textbook, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. She founded her church in Boston, and she founded a publishing society and a daily newspaper that goes around the world today. She was one of the sisters in the home of Mary and Martha, and is very close and dear to my heart. As a child, a small child, I selected the Christian Science Church in my hometown as being the church that offered me the most profound teachings that were available to me in my little town. So she passed on in about 1912, and she made her ascension. And for whatever work she has done throughout all ages, she received the title of Goddess of Wisdom, which means that she attained to the level of God in her wisdom, as opposed to the level of someone who would be only an ascended master. And so in this dictation, January 16, 1977, which as we clock it as the first step on the path of soul retrieval, it is in the sign of Capricorn. So she in her dictation described the sacred work of the assembling of the soul components. So we are about to study the sacred work of the assembling of the soul components. She said, "Have you ever thought that perhaps the components of your soul were not in alignment with the cube of the heart, the white cube? Have you perhaps left a portion of your soul in the past, or entrusted a portion of the soul with another part of life?" This is where we are most vulnerable. We are all most vulnerable at the level of our souls. Because as I have said already in this conference, the soul is mutable. It is not permanent, it is not immortal, and it must go through the process of becoming whole. So one of the ways and one of the reasons why our souls are not whole is because we have loved someone so much that we have given to another what is not ours to give away. It's like giving away the goose that laid the golden egg instead of just giving away the eggs. If you give away a portion of your soul, then a piece, like a piece in a puzzle, is missing. So if you trust someone so much, if you trust someone more than you trust God, if the fallen angels have lured you into their lair and promised you many things, and you are so impressed with their being wise and cunning, and you begin to consider that they are so much more intelligent than you are, and so much greater, and can perform all kinds of feats, that you simply give a portion of yourself away. You give a portion of yourself away when you allow someone to verbally abuse you or physically abuse you. You are also doing this to another if you give verbal abuse or physical abuse. And so we have to come to understand that the soul has been bruised and beaten. And there are many ways in which we, because of very low self-esteem in our psychology, wherein we do not think we are worthy, then we do not feel that the soul is worthy, and then we easily allow the soul to be trampled upon by those who would rob us of it, take it with them, steal it, and go to some other location in the universe with that part. So these are the things we have to look at, and we need to remember that the masters have told us we cannot take another step forward on the path unless we resolve our psychology. The word psyche means soul. So when we work on our psychology, as we say, we study under a therapist or we read many popular books on the subject, we are doing this because we must have resolution. We must have resolution with our own soul. Our soul must have resolution with our Holy Christ self. So we work through this. This is why we all need to be reading psychology books and begin to recognize that parts of ourselves are dysfunctional, meaning we are not functioning in the wholeness of the God-free being out of which God first created our souls in the beginning. So we may be dysfunctional in a slice of our life and very well balanced in other slices of our life. Life is a pie. And you go through the pie and you follow the lines of the clock, and you come to some lines where you bump into serious issues, whether of rebellion on the 4 o'clock line, not being able to deal with the energies of the sacred fire on the 10 o'clock line, and so forth. So we have strong lines on the clock and we have weak lines. We have strengths in our souls and we have weaknesses, but the point is all of the soul must become whole, because until she is whole, she cannot be the bride of Christ. So have you perhaps left a portion of your soul in the past, or entrusted a portion of the soul with another part of life? Those of you coming to Summit University, write to me, giving me your applications, and I review the outline of your lives and your past and why you want to be here. And we find the repetitive sequence where an individual has had a very deep love, and then this love falls apart, and that one is left and experiences the profound sorrow. And what happens is that the pain and the grief is so great that you just close off, cut off the memory of the love, the experience of the love, and you almost become mechanical, because these things are so deep and they are so difficult to deal with. So then we suppress, and then it goes into the subconscious, and then we take alternative routes. To numb ourselves from the pain of the experience, we take drugs, alcohol, all manner of things that simply deaden the senses. until we finally wake up or an angel taps us on the shoulder. Since I have reviewed the applications of Summit University students from the beginning, I see the repetitiveness of this, and I see that we all have to come through it. And that is why we are doing this soul retrieval today. So the Goddess of Wisdom continued in her dictation. Have you given your soul and placed it somewhere where you ought not to have placed it? In the keeping of someone who was mortal, in loyalties to the human consciousness and to the flesh that ought to be replaced immediately by loyalty to God and to the Spirit. Think then of drawing together your solar awareness and your soul consciousness. We use the word solar here because it relates to the sun, and the sun is the symbol of our soul, and our soul should look like the sun in the heavens in a blazing light of glory. We also think of the sun as being typical of the I Am presence. But your soul, perfected and whole and expanding and becoming the bride of Christ, is surely that tremendous fire of golden illumination that we see. It is typical of that soul. And so we call soul consciousness solar awareness, because when your soul is conscious and sensitive, and you have the 5 spiritual faculties of the soul that complement the 5 physical faculties, the 5 senses, then your soul can expand and move out and go out into all levels of the universe. And so the soul each day, as she is healing herself and being healed by her Holy Christ self, is gaining a greater and greater solar awareness, awareness of self, simply expanding beyond this world into other worlds. Think then of commanding the atoms and cells and electrons of the soul to return to the soul chakra. The seat of the soul chakra is at the place just above the base of the spine, between the navel and the base of the spine. That is the dwelling place of the soul in your body. So she counsels us to command atoms and cells and electrons of the soul to return to the soul chakra. Think then of drawing this solar fire and solar evolution and solar consciousness as a magnet whereby you, in the temple of the living God, might experience the wholeness of the temple beautiful. The temple beautiful is in the heaven world in the city foursquare. See then how to command life, how to understand that with all the law that is taught, there is a call for creativity, even genius, in knowing how to call and what to call. It is like knowing the next step in a very complex problem of mathematics, how to arrive at the desired solution, what equation shall be used, what method. It is like the physician picking from the shelf the necessary application, the necessary formula to the problem. Well, some of you have not even diagnosed the problem in order to now be concerned with that which must be applied as solution. Isn't it so true? We do not know that we have a problem. Therefore, how can we possibly solve the problem? So we need wisdom, and the Goddess of Wisdom says, therefore I bring to you a possibility and a probability. That the problem is the need to assemble the components of the soul. In some cases, the soul, its force field, has been split by very intense fears of the past, traumatic experiences, wherein you might say the soul has been driven underground, far into the depths of the subconscious, like a frightened child. The soul must be called back to the throne room, back to the 3-in-1, back to the place where the Trinity of the threefold flame is enshrined in the temple of the heart. I would like to point out to you that the soul does not necessarily want to be called back. She has conditioned herself by whatever situation she has settled into somewhere in the universe. We can call the soul back, but if the soul cannot be convinced by our own Christhood, that she must come back. She must come back to this altar of God, to the altar of change. She must be willing to go through the pain of the alteration and the surgery that is needed. We have to woo the soul back as though we were the lover of the soul and wooing her back to be our bride. And so the soul is a child. The soul is frightened. The soul is fragmented. On January 1st of this year, El Morya urged us to fuse the fragmented parts of our soul. He said, "On this first day of the year, I ask you first and foremost to make your peace with yourself." How many of you are at peace with yourself? It looks like less than 10%. You have made your peace with yourself. Well, if so many of us have not made our peace with ourselves, then we must understand that this is the starting point from this day forward till we establish that peace. I think you all know that there are aggravations within the astrology of each individual, where certain planets in certain houses cause a warring in your members. All astrology is the return of your karma of many past lives, and it can be lives ancient, 10, 20, 30,000 years ago. But we must find peace within ourselves. Perhaps the beginning is to study the teachings of Jesus and the apostles, and also to study our psychology and perhaps to get help. But first and foremost, we need to take a resolution that we are going to be at peace with ourselves. We are not going to have our parents, grandparents, and everyone all the way back to Adam warring within the core of our belly because we haven't achieved resolution of this. We have to encircle and bind and remove consciousnesses, entities, ancestral trees that are operating within us because we are not specifically making the call for these to be bound and removed and transmuted. Unless we can fill in the hole of where we have transmuted something with something better, then we do leave a hole within our beings. And that is why we hang on to what we have. As poor as it is, we hang on to it because it's a part of our identity. So the exchange for the better and the giving up of the lesser, it has to be an exchange and an interchange. If you want to improve in your relationships with people, you have to exorcise what is the problem with your relationships with people, and then you have to fill the vacuum. Jesus said, "Go and sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you." And he was talking to the one out of whom he cast devils. The house was empty, so don't sin again, because the devils that were there will come back bringing 10 or 20 more. So making peace with ourselves, we can now understand just by the absence of the show of hands, is the first order of business from El Morya for this very year. Make peace with ourselves. For if you are not at peace with yourself, you will not be at peace with me, and surely I will not be at peace with you. That's Morya speaking to you. I shall come where your members are divided within and without, and I shall help you fuse the fragmented parts of the soul into one whole. I will come, beloved. But I say, whether you have a difficult psychology or health problems or a challenging astrology, let it be understood that the members of your being must be in harmony with one another, so that there is not a warring between these members, whereby one organ does not work with another organ. Protect your inner child. Call upon us as the three wise men to tend and nurture and protect your inner child. For as you know, your inner child is your soul, who needs your loving attention. And if you hear many children speaking to you from within, know that these are fragments of your soul, many voices crying out for deliverance. and the fragrance must become one voice, one soul immaculate. Only then shall that soul rise in wholeness as a totality of being. The only way you will achieve harmony with all of the various parts of the psyche is through mercy and forgiveness. Mercy whereby you forgive yourself, mercy whereby you forgive others. Not to forgive oneself and not to forgive others is fatal to your path. You are not on the path if you cannot extend forgiveness. You are not on the path if you will not forgive yourself, and I submit to you, the reason you do not forgive yourself is pride. You may think that that is strange, because you think of yourself as being anything but proud because you have such a low opinion of yourself. But as a matter of fact, El Morya teaches us that it is pride. We are too proud to go before Almighty God and ask His forgiveness. So we're going to deal with this all by ourselves. We're going to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and we are not going to bend the knee and go before God and say, God, I have compromised your law. I call on the law of forgiveness. And then give your violet flame to take care of it. So think about it. If you refuse to forgive yourself, it's not a point of humility, it's a point of pride. You are not asking God for forgiveness. On May 14th, 1995, Gautama Buddha said, "Let us take into account that a calamity has happened in the earth, a grave calamity, the breaking of the vessels, the breaking of the vessels, the breaking of the vessels of consciousness, so much so that in many cases the individual no longer holds intact the wholeness of the mighty sphere of his own soul. The soul must be whole to be the vessel of the Christ consciousness. For this reason we have called upon the messenger, and we will continue to call upon her to conduct the ritual of soul retrieval. Thus we call her to summon in our name fragments of souls scattered here and there, and to magnetize them to their rightful owners." So Gautama Buddha, in his Wesak address this year, made this teaching an important part of his delivery. As I originally prepared myself to perform this soul retrieval ritual, I asked El Morya why there are scattered fragments of the soul. How could this have happened? He said that soul fragmentation occurs when we do not maintain peace. If we do not have absolute peace in our being, we cannot hold on to or magnetize these fragments. And this is really the crux of the problem. If we have mentioned today, if we have affirmed that we are not at peace with ourselves, then how can we have the peace that begets the power whereby we can magnetize back to ourselves the elements of our being? And this is why years ago the Ascended Masters recommended the books on psychology, etc. What enables you to draw back the components of your soul is the fire of your heart. The forces that are pulling inward to the soul must be more powerful than the forces that would scatter the soul. It's a question of centripetal and centrifugal force. We must have the ability to magnetize to us that which has the tendency to be flung out of the spinning solar presence in our temple. As long as we walk the earth in mortal bodies, we must be vigilant to guard the soul. What suffers first when someone condemns you? Do you not feel it here in the soul, and you feel down, and someone has told you you've done a terrible thing, and instead of your energies being up, they're down, instead of being yang, they're yin? And you can go around a whole day if you want to, or you can make fiats at the moment. But it's not an easy thing to give the fiats and the calls to overcome personal condemnation or world condemnation. And that world condemnation is what Jesus Christ and all avatars have borne. They have borne it, and they have been condemned from the very beginning. And so the soul becomes very hurt, because the soul is, in many cases, innocent and does not know why she is being condemned. So you have to care for the soul and not let yourself be downhearted, but immediately react and defend the soul. Take out your Archangel Michael's sword and give fiats. Give your fiats to cut the soul free. Speak to the soul. Comfort. Give consolation as you would to a little child. And so the masters say the only place where soul retrieval should take place is in the force field of the absolute protection of the ascended masters. Soul retrieval should not be sought by you by a shaman or a psychologist or any other person who does not have the mantle to do this work with you. Transmutation is involved, it must be involved, and you need to be in a protected force field. The only permanent way to retrieve the soul is through the bonding of your soul to your Holy Christ self. Now we're going to sing the song of Look Through My Soul, O Christ of Me. We'll sing it 3 times. It is a profound prayer that we will begin with. Number 15. This is a meditation. It's a deep meditation, so I'm asking you to be seated and go into your heart and sing this as a deep lullaby to your soul. Sing to your soul now.
Down at thy fire, my world refine. Look through
Now we reach the section in our lecture on 2 kinds of sparks in Kabbalah. El Morya has directed me today to make calls to liberate the sparks of God's light that are scattered throughout the world. This does not refer to the soul. It refers to exactly what I just said. Sparks of God's light scattered throughout the world. So as part of this soul retrieval, I will also make these calls. This is the teaching on the matter. The Jewish mystical tradition known as Kabbalah names 2 kinds of sparks that need to be liberated. The first set of sparks were scattered as a result of what 16th century Kabbalist Isaac Luria called the breaking of the vessels. To briefly describe his theory, Luria said that in the process of creation, the infinite God, called Ein Sof, issued a ray of light. Ein Sof's light manifested 10 divine emanations called the Sphirot. Each emanation was to be preserved in a special vessel. Some of these vessels, however, were unable to hold that light and shattered. In this disaster, shards of the broken vessels scattered and fell. Some of the light that was in the vessels found its way back to God, but some of the light fell along with the shards of the broken vessels and became attached to them. From these shards, the dark forces of evil took shape. These dark forces are called husks or shells. Luria said that the husks of evil have no power of their own. They have no power of their own. It is the sparks of light that are trapped among the husks that give life and power to evil. The breaking of the vessels not only animated evil, but also inaugurated the creation of the material world, for the broken shards are the basis of all matter. In effect, this is Luria's theory, which is highly plausible. In effect, Luria taught that with the catastrophic event of the breaking of the vessels, God himself became shattered, and parts of him are exiled from the rest, trapped among the husks. The second set of sparks that need to be rescued are the souls that were once contained within the first man, Adam. Luria said that Adam had the opportunity to rescue the sparks of light that fell when the vessels broke, but for whatever reason he failed. Scholar Gershom Scholem writes, Adam was by nature a purely spiritual figure, a great soul, whose very body was a spiritual substance, an ethereal body or body of light. The soul of Adam was composed of all the worlds and was destined to uplift and reintegrate all the sparks of holiness that were left in the husks. His soul's garment was of spiritual ether, and it contained within it all of the souls of the human race in perfect condition. Had Adam fulfilled his mission through the spiritual works of which he was capable, which called for contemplative action and deep meditation, and as we would say, the science of the spoken word, the power of evil, the husks, would have undergone complete separation from holiness. Instead of uplifting everything, however, he caused it to fall even further. As a result, Adam assumed a material body. His soul shattered and its unity was smashed to pieces. The bulk of the souls that were in Adam fell from him and were subjugated by the husks. That's the end of the quote by Gershom Scholem. According to this theory, Adam's soul contained the souls of all humanity. And each of these souls, including our own souls, are sparks of his great soul. Luria also taught that the souls within Adam are divided into a number of groups or soul families. Each family shares a common root. The souls that belong to these families, says Scholem, are able to assist and strengthen one another. They suffer with one another, and anything done by one of them, good or bad, affects all the others. Their destiny is determined by a deep, invisible connection of soul affinity. Soul affinity. I've always believed that our summer conferences is so that people from all over the world can come here and meet someone or many souls that they must have contact with in this life. That's why you see in the sign when you enter the heart, the place of great encounters. Their destiny is determined by a deep, invisible connection of soul affinity. It is the task of man to seek out the sparks of his root or soul family. You can see now why you are easily drawn to certain people. You have something to work out, perhaps something of the nature of the soul. The goal of the Kabbalist is to repair the cleavage that has taken place in the Godhead as a result of the breaking of the vessels and Adam's fall, to restore the universe to its original design. This process is called tikkun, which means literally fixing, repair, or restoration. To perform tikkun, we must find the sparks embedded everywhere and liberate them to return to their divine source. How do we do this? By observing the commandments of God and praying with a correct spiritual understanding, devotion, and meditation, and of course, as we would add, the science of the spoken word. Thus, Luria taught that there are two kinds of sparks to rescue. One, the sparks that fell when the vessels broke. Two, the sparks or souls that were once a part of Adam's soul. Luria said that anyone can strive to raise up the sparks of light that fell when the vessels broke. As for the sparks of Adam's soul, we can only raise up those sparks that belong to our own soul family. All those who are a part of the mystical body of God have a collective mission to rescue the sparks, but each son and daughter of God has a unique role to play in that great drama. Therefore, in Luria's scheme, our task is to raise up the sparks that are scattered throughout all of the creation, to raise up the sparks that belong to our soul family, and to perfect and thereby liberate our own soul. Let's look at your unique role in rescuing the sparks. The Hasidic movement that blossomed in the 18th century transformed Luria's teaching on uplifting the sparks of light. According to Hasidism, the sparks that you and you alone can liberate are embedded in your environment, in food, drink, and other material objects you come in contact with. The idea that each person is responsible to redeem the sparks within his own personal sphere is well developed in the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. He says that God makes certain that each person will meet the sparks that belong to the root of his soul. The grandson of the Baal Shem Tov writes, "I heard from my grandfather that everything belonging to a human being, and even the objects in his household, are all sparks of him, pertaining to the root of his soul, which he must lift up to their root. When a man ascends upward, then they all ascend with him, and all this takes place when he truly cleaves to God, and in this way he can lift them too." What we see here is we notice when we go into our own home how we are comfortable in our own things. And if we go in someone else's house, they have a distinct vibration, a distinct manner in the way they run their households, and their objects and treasures and whatever they have as furniture and so forth, all are a part of their consciousness. So it makes sense when you think about that, because every house you enter has a different vibration. Distinctly so. Sometimes you are comfortable, sometimes you are not comfortable. For the Baal Shem Tov, cleaving to God is the key to our being able to fulfill our mission of redeeming the sparks. cleaving to God. Hasidism's personal approach to rescuing the sparks led to a unique understanding of how to pursue the spiritual quest amidst the challenges of living in the world. For them, the rescue operation of saving the sparks doesn't take place just while we are praying, studying, or observing the commandments. It also takes place while we are engaged in necessary worldly pursuits, as long as our mind is stayed on God. When attending to his material needs for the sake of God, the Hasid is carrying out acts of divine worship, writes Rabbi Louis Jacobs. The Hasidic ideal to which all else is made subordinate is that of cleaving to God, where the total concentration of the mind is on God. 18th century Hasidic Rabbi Levi Isaac of Berdichev says, "When you desire to eat or drink or to fulfill other worldly desires, and you focus your awareness on the love of God, then you elevate that physical desire to spiritual desire. You may take your food or drink, but you elevate the experience to a spiritual desire. Thereby you draw out the holy spark that dwells within. You bring forth holy sparks from the material world. There is no path greater than this, for wherever you go and whatever you do, even mundane activities, you serve God." I would submit to you that serving God day and night is a way to make peace with yourself. Those of you who did not, raise your hands. I think of the process of retrieving the sparks as taking a cosmic tweezer and pulling out little specks of gold embedded in dense matter. That's what it looks like to me. And doing this is the mighty work of the ages. Our blissful union with God is not merely for the exaltation or even escape of our own soul. It has a far greater purpose. That union confers upon us the spiritual empowerment we need to rescue souls who have not yet magnetized to themselves the power of light that could set them free. The blissful union of God confers spiritual empowerment. We must seek that empowerment. You see that there is a release of empowerment each day by the masters who are speaking to us in this conference. To rescue souls, we need God's power. To get God's power, we must find peace within ourselves.